G'day, today I'm going to be changing the wheel bearing on this rear axle of a Hilux Kun26, the sort of 2005 through to 2015 range. Now I do have another video when I did the other side that badly needed attention. This side started growling at me now. It's done about 100,000 Ks, so it's a good opportunity to do a much more comprehensive guide with the disassembly, the assembly, the tool I made and how to use it. So let's get started. We'll get the wheel off, we'll get the drum off, and I'll show you how to remove the brakes. Alright, so we jacked it up on the center of the axle and dropped the axle stand in there. The weight is now sitting on the axle stand, so we're all safe. The wheel's off, and I've chucked it under the car as well as a precaution. With the handbrake off, if it's manual, put it in gear, automatic, leave it in park, but the handbrake's got to be off. Give the drum a good solid smack, and maybe a couple, and it should come off. Just look out, a bit of brake dust coming through. Don't breathe that in if you can avoid it. It's loose now. You can take that off. Hold the brake. Alright, let's put the brakes off. Alright, with the drum off, we have two brake shoes in here, leading and a trailing. We've got a couple of retainers here and here that hold them to the backing plate. We've got a spring here, and there's another spring down the side here, and obviously the handbrake cable's in there as well. So we're going to have to remove all of that to get them off. These clips just come off. A pair of pliers and get them off. Like that. Don't lose the pin that's behind them. Same with this side. Flip them off. The bottom spring, they just hooked on. That. I've got another one just. Yeah. Like that. Little auto tensioner, or auto adjuster that never works. That out, and then we've got the handbrake cable comes through the bottom here. This is a much harder cable to get on than the other springs. It's really bad. It's easy to get off though, so that's good. Cool, with those off, I leave it together. You don't have to, but I like to leave it all as one. Flick it off at the bottom. And we can lift it up without damaging the boots. Like that. Cool. Now we can undo the backing plate, take off the brake line, we can slide the whole assembly out, change the bearing. Easy. Okay, with them brake pads off, we need to get this brake line off here. We're going to use a flare spanner for that. And we've got the 4 bolts here that mount the backing plate to the axle housing. We've got 2 bolts there for the park brake. And what I've also done, I've just chucked a line locker down there on the soft line to try and reduce the amount of brake fluid I'm going to be spilling here and make bleeding the brakes a little bit easier. So I'll get this line off here, we'll undo these 4 bolts and those 2, we should be able to remove the axle. Okay, we're going to remove these 2 here with a 10mm. Alright, we've also got to remove this one here that sits on the leaf here. We're just going to use a 12mm. Get that out of the way, and we can pull through the backing plate. There's a bracket at the bottom there that the cable needs to be fed through. We'll just flick that out of the way. Alright, it's just these 4 nuts here now. We'll get the axle out. Alright, we're just going to undo these nuts now. I've undone 3 of them to make the process a bit faster. Okay, I've loosened that up with a couple of taps with the hammer and we should be able to slide that out. It's going to have axle oil on it, so just try to keep it clean and tidy on the way out. Stuff doesn't come out of the pavement so well. Alright, well it's out and the bearing isn't too bad. That's how tall it is. It's quite long. Now this is a tool I made up. I did use it last time as well. It's got a base on it. It's 50 by 50 square. That is actually a pool fence post. I've welded these on so it will hold in the press, and I've used this last time to knock the bearing on. We'll use that again as well. The idea is that this here goes up and over. We take some studs. bolted on here. I'm going to put it in the press and we're going to press the shaft out. Now, very important, before we do anything, there is a circlip on here. We must remove that circlip first or else it's never going to press off. Let's do it. Alright, so I've just popped the circlip out of its groove here with a pair of circuit pliers. We've just got to finish it off. If it's a little bit misshapen, we can just sort of tighten it up in the vise. They're quite malleable, oddly, for a circlip. They do stretch. So we would square that up when we put it back together. Now, with that off, this is where we're going to use the tool. We're going to slide it on, put the nuts on, put it in the press. If you don't have a press and you want to do the job, you can cut the collar off very carefully with a grinder. If you've got a 5-inch grinder or something like this, you can come in and you can cut the collar off by grinding it down and hitting it with a chisel. Not the ideal way to do it, but it's the way a lot of people do the job. I'm going to stick this on, put it in the press, and hopefully my press has enough power to push that collar off. I think we'll be okay. Okay, we're going to use the nuts from the car and some N10 washers. I'm going to go the right way. Just going to pull this down. Alright, I'm ready to stick in the press. Okay, so we've got it sort of set up like this. We've got the two little welded sections on the pipe there to hold it up. And then down the bottom there, that's where the axle is going to come out. I'm just going to put a bit of pressing force on the top of the axle here. And hopefully, it comes out. Okay, it's still quite tough. Tight, but it is coming out. That's a small win. Alright, cool, that's coming out there. I'm just going to put something down on the floor there to catch it so I don't put a big hole in my concrete. And we can press it out from there. So here we are. Now, I just remove this. Stand back and watch the action. Lovely. Okay, cool. Shaft is out. It's pretty good. The bearing hasn't spun on this one, which is nice. Means we can reuse the shaft. I'm just going to knock the bearing out. I'm just got a socket here. I'm just going to tap the bearing out, flip the backing plate over, and then we'll knock this rubber seal out here. Give the backing plate a clean. And we'll start putting everything back together. Well, I'll just knock the bearing out. The bearing isn't tight inside the backing. It falls out pretty easily. Flip the backing plate over and we'll knock the seal out. My little 52mm socket here is not only good for hubs, good for seals as well. Lovely, we'll give this a good clean up, clean all that brake dust off, get it all tidy, ready for the new seal and the new bearing, and then we're going to assemble it all back up. Alright, so here's our bearing kit and everything we get in it. We have the collar that's going to seal inside this axle seal here, and that goes on top of the bearing. We've got the bearing itself, got the O-ring for the back of the brake plate, and we've got a dust boot here that goes on the other side of the brake plate. Just make sure you get the right kit, because in 2008 Toyota did change the axle shaft size, and you will need to buy the correct bearing for the year of your car. Just do a quick Google. There's a few results there. In 2008 they did change the axles they were putting in these machines. It's always best to buy genuine if you can. As you can see, I haven't. This is just what I could get hold of locally, because I want to do the job today. So plan ahead and get genuine if you can, but let's see how long these last. I think they should be okay. Alright, so we've got to put the dust boot in the top here now, it's all cleaned up, and we'll flip it over and put the bearing in the other side before we stick it on the shaft. Don't exactly have the ideal tooling, but it'll do the job. With that fitted, yep, flip it over. Now the bearing has, most bearings will have a bit of a large radius on one side rather than the other, and the large radius has to go down so the axle shaft radius can suit it. This one, the radius, it seems to be identical on both sides. So we're going to stick it this way around, drop it in the housing there, and just tap it in. They're not tight. All the way home, and we lift the whole thing onto the shaft. Alright, so we chuck the shaft on the ground there, plate over the top, till it comes to a stop. Now obviously we've got to touch the bearing on to the shaft, get it all the way down, and then we'll follow up with the collar, then the circlip. So that's where this little tool here comes in. Just going to tap that down all the way to the bottom, we'll follow it up with the collar. Alright, so they're both on there. You push them on one at a time. Do the bearing first, then the collar. All I'm doing is literally just sliding a bit of 40 by 40 down the shaft. You don't need to hit it hard. That's hard enough. And it's loud enough too. Do the bearing first, then the collar. If you do them together, it's a lot more hard work. One by one, they're actually pretty easy. You can get them down in 3 or 4 slides. It's not too bad. We'll go ahead and put the circlip on now. You can see the groove. We've gone far enough. That's all you need to do is go down just till you can see the groove. Let's put the circlip on and we'll refit it. Okay, we've just got to change out the axle seal here. It's always good to do so, especially if you've got aftermarket bearings. The collars tend to be matched to their respective axle seals. So if we just get in here, the little crowbar, we can just pop this out. Easy like that. Now, let's clean that surface up and we'll chuck the new one in. I'm just going to use an 1 7/8" socket there, just to pop it in. You've got to make sure it's flush with the face. You don't want to go too far in or it may leak. I've seen them leak before where the axle seal is just pushed a little bit too far in. You want them to go that way around. The spring to the oil is always a good measure. If the spring's facing the oil, you should be in good stead. Start it off like that, then just drop the big socket on here, just tap it home. Might just need to square up the face a little bit. You want it just flush with the face, no more than that. That's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So you want it square as well, as square as possible, because obviously it's running on an axle that's going to be square. Lovely, very good. Now we've got a brand new O-ring as well. The O-ring runs around this face here. We're just going to put a little bit of rubber grease on the O-ring, get it on there, and then we can slide the axle home, connect all the brakes, and we can torque it all up. Alright, let's just chuck that on. A little bit of rubber grease on it, like I said. Beautiful. Nice, clean enough surface. With that in there, we're happy the axle seal's good. We can go ahead and we'll slide this assembly home. Make sure when you put the backing plate in that the outlet for the brake slave cylinder, the wheel cylinder if you will, is at the top. Cool. You might have some issue getting it into the diff spline. I didn't then, which is really nice. So we're definitely in there. We've just got to bring the nuts home now. We'll wind them all home, connect the brake line, put all the brakes back together. Okay, we're just going to make sure we torque up these nuts here. We torque them to 50 foot-pounds, 70 newton meters. If you don't have a torque wrench, tight is good, but they're pretty critical. You want to make sure that they are at least close torque to spec. double check them all. We're happy that they're all tight. And we'll move on to getting the brake line all tight as well. And then the handbrake cable can come back through. Beautiful. Alright, next step, we'll just make sure that this brake line is tight. I've just fitted it and screwed it home. I'm just gonna, yep, that's tight, I'm happy with that. We'll take the line locker off before we try and bleed it. And we'll run this handbrake cable back through. That, and we've got a bracket obviously to go back on as well. Make sure that all lines up, and we're happy. We've got the bolt back in there. They just need to be tight, you don't need to go too crazy with those. Tiny little bolts, hold it in the back. Wind them in to tighten them up. And we've got to fit this handbrake cable back to the brakes, which is never enjoyable. Before I drop these brake pads back on, it's always best to free up the adjuster while we're here. Obviously we need to adjust the brakes through this hole manually. The auto adjuster should be doing it for us as well. Clean up all the threads, a little bit of dry lubricant on there, and this should turn easily. Mine is fairly seized, so I'm going to clean it up first before we put this back together. Okay, the parking brake cable. So when it comes to the parking brake cable, I like to move the spring all the way out the way so we can then slot it in. This is still all loose, I've just hung it over the top. What we need to do is give ourselves quite a bit of cable here so we have enough to slide over here. There's a couple of ways to do that. It's not an easy job, this one, getting the cable right. It can be really quite frustrating. Do a little bit like this. A little bit each time. Just got to expose enough cable to get it over that. Alright, that's probably enough there. You gotta have a strong grip on you. And we drop it in like that. Can be a very annoying job, that part, but once you get it on, it's good. Okay, with that done, it's just the rest of the braking components that need to go back in. We have a couple of springs, the 2 locks, and the adjuster, the auto adjuster. Let's make sure everything lines up. We can drop the bottom sections on to the backing plate down here. Oh, like that, without ruining that boot. Cool. Sort of like that. The auto adjuster sits on a roll pin here. Just sits against the gear, and the idea is that as we have a lot of stroke, this should move down and actually auto adjust the brakes for us. Whether they work or not, not sure. Put these locking pins in. That's one. That's not two. Right, once we've got them on, we'll put our last 2 springs on. Just be sure that once you've got the handbrake cable in, it does go through the bracket like that. If it sits on the wrong side of the bracket, it will rub on the back of the wheel hub. Just make sure that it's through there. I've put one together once and forgotten. It makes a hell of a noise. Okay, once we've got this little bottom spring in here and it sits behind that clasp, last thing you do, we've got our auto adjuster. Goes in, we've just got to push a little tab under there, sits on a roll pin there like that and against the gear, and there's a spring here. The spring hook's just behind it, and then in the front on this side. I'm not sure if it matters which way around that goes. That's how I've always done it. Seems to continue to work. I'm just going to make sure we hook it into here like that to away from everything. In theory, when we have a long amount of stroke, it should pull down and adjust here for us. We will need to adjust it as soon as we put the drum on, because I've had this apart. We'll whack the drum on and we'll see how much adjustment we do need to do. Okay, just before we do put the drum back on, especially if you put new brake pads in or you've adjusted this, shortened it in order to get the whole assembly back together, it also helps put the drum back on. We need to make sure we adjust the brakes. Now there's a little hole in the back, and we can use a screwdriver around this size is always pretty good, and we can turn this gear here. I'll give you a bit of a zoom in and we'll have a look. This gear here, you can just see my screwdriver coming through. You go on the back of the gear and you turn it in this direction like this. Now we're going to be adjusting that once the drum's back on, but what we're going to do is put the drum on, put the car in neutral, and then we're going to spin the drum, the axle assembly, just until these touch the inside of the drum. We're going to keep adjusting just till they drag a little bit. We'll feel on the park brake too. Obviously we'll adjust the other side, and the park brake should be about 5 clicks. Sometimes you need to adjust the brakes in these Hilux, and that's how you do it. Okay, so adjusted all the brakes up. I'm happy that there's enough sort of drag on the brakes on both sides. I've got it all jacked up and had the wheels off the ground to do that. The handbrake's got that sort of 5 clicks. I'm pretty happy with that. So pretty much all we've got to do now is we'll remove these 2 nuts, we'll put the wheel back on, and then we'll bleed the brakes. It's a bit of a 2-man operation, so I'll get someone to pump the brakes for me while I sort this end out. Just make sure if you use a line locker, take it off, or else you won't have any rear brakes, and that's not ideal. That's pretty much the job in a nutshell. Thanks for watching.